Well, hello everyone, welcome back to another video on what's probably turned out to be the hottest day of the year so far here in the UK. Not necessarily the best weather for somebody of my complexion, but you know, I do what I can. And I say that I do what I can because I don't want to be beholden to the weather. I want to make the most of the opportunities I have to go out with my camera, and those aren't always the days with the perfect conditions. I've been on a bit of a black and white photography kick recently. The summer just seems to be a great time for that because there's often harsh light, blue skies, you know, from shooting in the middle of the afternoon. Colour is sometimes tricky, and it's got me thinking a lot about the process of shooting black and white. You know, when is it useful? What is it useful for? And how do you really get the most out of your images when it's devoid of colour and a lot of the aspects of photography that people are drawn to? So I'm going to talk you through my approach, what I think about, and give you some pointers if you want to give it a go yourself. Whilst we still have a bit of summer left, there's plenty of time to give it a go. Now, what I really love about black and white photography is that it makes you think about your potential subjects and compositions in a completely different way. You're not necessarily able to use colour as a primary draw to a potential subject. You have to think about other aspects, and contrast is definitely one of those. It's the interaction between the light and the dark, the light and shadows. It's that relationship and it's the contrast that creates that gives a lot of images their photographic potential, I suppose. And I definitely, when I first started shooting black and white, I used to just take colour photos and then go in Lightroom and just convert them to black and white. And whilst I had some okay results, I did that a couple of weeks ago on a trip to the Llŷn Peninsula here in North Wales, and I was taking some colour photos and converted them to black and white, and I liked the black and white versions more. But it was kind of a fluke because I wasn't intending on them being black and white. But I think if you're shooting black and white, you have to be intentional about that. And in order to see things and to see the potential of images, it's important to shoot in a picture profile on your camera that allows you to see in black and white, as opposed to just shooting everything in colour and hoping for the best when you get back home. So that's my first tip. So one of the most crucial aspects of photography is the relationship that light plays in the image making process. I mean, photography is just capturing light at the end of the day, and I feel like shooting in black and white really helps you understand the relationship between light and your subjects. I'll talk to you a little bit about where I am today. So I'm in Eryri National Park here in North Wales. I've got a lovely vantage point here over my shoulder. You can see the Snowdon Horseshoe, you can see Tryfan, and this vantage point gives me great visibility for miles and miles and miles, so I can really start to see how light is changing this landscape as it moves through the clouds, as it reveals itself and as it disappears. And there's a lot of agricultural industry around here. There's obviously some opportunities for landscape images, so there's going to be a lot to explore, I suppose. And really, when you're thinking about light, the things that I'm looking out for specifically with black and white is what I was mentioning earlier. It's about contrast. Take a road, for example. You know, if the sun is blaring down on the tarmac, it can look very white and very bright. And if you have a wall that's leading alongside the road that is in shadow, that creates a really nice contrast. And it's things like that that I notice as I'm driving around this area, because I don't really know what I'm going to photograph. I'm just kind of seeing what I notice and seeing what catches my attention. So something I feel like I could benefit from is just slowing down from time to time. Sometimes photo shoots can feel a little bit frantic, and I've probably talked about that on this channel in the past, but black and white photography for me really is an exercise in patience. When we're talking about the light and how it casts its mark on the landscape, really how that light moves through the scene drastically changes it, and sometimes you have to wait for the right moment where the light is landing in the right part of your scene to get the shot in its best form. It's like this tree that is right behind me. I was driving down this road and there was just something about the form of the tree that just really caught my attention. Where the sun is currently positioned, the trunk of the tree is quite silhouetted, it's quite dark, but the leaves are kind of catching some of the light. But there's a great expansive landscape behind that tree, and there's a distant barn, it's like a farmhouse I think, and it was starting to catch the light, and I was able to frame it in such a way to kind of incorporate that farm within the scene. It's kind of a minimal shot because the barn itself is the only feature within that landscape. But as the sort of time progressed, the scene was just evolving and evolving and evolving, and I just stood here for about 5 minutes just waiting and seeing what happens. So if you ever do feel like you're kind of rushing sometimes and you want to take a bit more time to, I guess, kind of consider your scenes and your subjects, then I think shooting in black and white might be a good way to kind of restrict you in that way, because yeah, it does teach you a lot about patience, and patience is a virtue after all, as they say. So the heat got the better of me, and I thought I would just come back home and talk you through the remainder of these points here in the comfort of my office, where I can actually look at the images on the screen, talk about the compositions, and give you some more tips around how you can approach shooting black and white, both from a compositional standpoint, but also from a kind of narrative or storytelling standpoint, because that, for me, is something that I really enjoy. So let's start by talking about aesthetic for a second. So I feel like I'm quite lucky living here in North Wales, because I just find that there is history and there is evidence of the past everywhere that I go. Take, for example, the location that is featured in this video in the hills of Arori National Park. There's so many old buildings, there's so much evidence of the agricultural and the farming history of that landscape, and I feel like anywhere where you have history and you have the opportunity to showcase a moment in time, I feel like black and white has a very nostalgic feel and always kind of works well for those types of subjects. And we've talked today about the benefit of shooting black and white on sunny days, but I also feel like it can be really beneficial in moodier conditions. Black and white adds so much drama, and again, if you add in some of those subjects that are maybe steeped in history, you really do start to paint a really compelling picture. And I just think that that's something that colour can't always do as well. I would love to hear your thoughts on that down in the comments. And some final tips I want to share are all around composition, because I do feel like composition is especially tricky in black and white, but it can be really easy if you adopt some of these principles. Obviously, when we talk about composition, there are multiple ways that you can compose an image, and there are multiple aspects of images that make compelling compositions. Thinking about colour, about form, about contrast, about what's happening in the scene. But in black and white, we're starting to remove some of those aspects, and it really makes you hone in on, I guess, elements of composition that you might not typically think about, or if you are including them, you might be doing it subconsciously. So let's take this as an example. So this image of the big telephone mast, I think it's a telephone mast, with the fields with the sheep and the distant peaks of the national park. There's something about rhythm that I think is really important in black and white photography. Because you only have two tones, either bright and dark or black and white, however you want to look at it, if you look at the frame as a whole, you don't want tones to be clustered together in different parts of the frame, it can make it look quite imbalanced and it can make it feel quite cluttered. So when I say rhythm, what I mean is thinking about how the tonality of your scene, how that rhythm portrays itself throughout the composition. So in this particular scene, we have the bright white of the field with the sheep, then we have a darker midground where we see the mountains, and then again we have another bright aspect, which is the sky. So it creates that repetition and that nice rhythm. It creates layers within your scene, and that's something that I think is really, really beneficial, and you will notice that a lot more if you shoot in your black and white picture profile. You might start to pick up on that as you're wandering around and sort of, looking at the landscape. I think it's a really beneficial compositional tool. Negative space is also a really powerful compositional tool in black and white photography, but if you have something within the negative space that is contrasting it, so if you have the white of the sky, for example, if you have, like in this image, the two birds that are kind of occupying that negative space but with their darker silhouettes, it really just helps it pop in that particular scene. Then just thinking about that complementary relationship, I think, is really important. This image might not have the same impact if shot in color, because if the sky is very blue and the mountains are also a little bit blue and the birds themselves are quite dark, then you don't get that same dramatic contrast. And that's why I think black and white photography can be so beneficial to explore and to experiment with, because it does open up differences in shooting style and in compositional sensibility, I suppose. And I feel like that definitely helps you progress as a photographer, because you're going to just be shooting things in a slightly different way. So there we have it, just a few thoughts on black and white photography. I hope you found this video helpful. I would love to know your thoughts on black and white photography down in the comments below. Do you shoot black and white? Do you shoot black and white digitally, or do you prefer film? I actually did shoot a roll, or I've nearly shot a roll of Ilford HP5 on my 35mm camera. I haven't quite finished the roll yet, so I haven't got anything to share, but I'm hoping to develop those and share those in a future video, and I'm really interested to see how those photos come out, because like I said, I'm just on a bit of a black and white photography kick at the moment. So would love to know your thoughts on the subject. Let me know also what you think of the photos in this video, and as always, thank you so much for tuning in and for showing your support. I really do appreciate it, and I love to see all of you guys in the comments, so do get in touch. Anyway, I'm rambling now, so I will leave it there. Thanks for watching, and see you all next week.